So I've been farming for 20 years. Thanks. Yeah, please, take everything you want. So can we talk about 20 years?
Yeah, that's good.
So, and I also grew up on the land that I'm farming now. So really, I'm going back almost 50 years. We had huge gardens and stuff when we were a kid, so I've known the seasons since I was a kid. I left home when I was 17, and for the next 10 years, 7 of the next 10 years, I was studying abroad. And then I came back home to start farming when I was 27, so 10 years later. And even the difference between what I remembered as a kid and what I remembered 10 years later, there was a big difference in the seasons. Things that when I was a kid, we considered, for example, sweet potatoes was something that were too far north to grow good sweet potatoes because they need a really long season in the hot summer. And I decided to try to grow them, and I had a great crop for my very first year, so that was a difference already. Peas, we used to have great peas when we were kids because peas need a long, cool spring. I noticed right away that peas weren't growing very well because it would turn hot earlier in the year. And then I take very good records of everything that's planted. I write down the date and what's planted, how the harvest came out, everything. So I have good records of when I plant things. And I'd say over the past 20 years, there's been a 2-week pushback. So say when I started farming, I would plant beets on April 15th. Now I plant them April 1st or even the end of March. And so it tells you that the soil temperature is 2 weeks earlier. It gets up to the temperature that's good for germinating beet seed, for this as an example. So that's a 2-week difference on the beginning of the season. And I've also noticed over the 20 years we've been pushed back in the fall. So I used to, for example, my last planting of, say, arugula would be maybe the first week of September. Now it's the 3rd week of September. So basically my season's gotten a month longer in 20 years, and that's a huge difference. In 20 years to add a full month to a growing season is pretty astounding. The main thing that worries me the most, and this is just in the past 5 years, is there was a guy I remember who tried to popularize the term global weirding instead of global warming, because he said that the climatologist said what's going to happen is it's not necessarily going to get warmer, but it's going to get weirder. And I'd say in the past 5 years, it's definitely been getting weirder. So what that means is our droughts are more severe, our wet spells are more severe, our hot spells are more severe, our cold spells are more severe, our storms are bigger, our winds are stronger. Just everything is basically ramped up, the intensity of the weather. And that's been a big difference just over the past 5 years, I'd say. When you look at things from year to year, it's really hard to see a trend. But when been doing it for 20 years, and like I said, I've been living there for 50 years, and those trends start to get pretty hard to just say, oh, this is just normal, fluctuations of the climate. Pretty convinced that this is global warming, and that we're starting to feel those effects that are just going to get more and more severe in our. For a long time, I thought it wasn't going to happen in my lifetime. I would tell my kids, this is I'm sorry, but we're creating a problem for you guys. But I'm 50 now, and I think in the next 20 years, 30 years, before the end of my life, we're going to see really drastic effects. It's going to be impossible to deny in another 20 years.
What advice would you have to people if you were speaking to them in regards to this whole situation with the climate crisis?
Mm-hmm. That's very difficult because basically we have to completely change our entire lifestyle, entire society, entire civilization has to change. I mean, the most obvious thing is we just have to stop using fossil fuels. And unfortunately, we've already dug ourselves into such a hole with what we've poured into the atmosphere already that I'm sure, as you know, even if we completely went to zero emissions right now, the effects are going to get worse. I've made baby steps forward using biodiesel that's made from used cooking oil. I have one electric tractor, but again, I'm getting my electric off the grid, so it's really hard. If you think about the amount of life that went in to produce, say, a gallon of oil or a barrel of oil, it's some astounding. I think to to go 15 miles. I don't know, for a gallon of gas, which say you have a 20-mile, say your car gets 20 miles to the gallon. If you drive your car and use up that gallon, drive for 20 miles, that's the equivalent of of using 40 acres of wheat. And this is the wheat grains, the wheat stalks, the wheat roots. That's how much life it takes to go 20 miles.
Oh, wow.
So I mean that just shows you how much power that is and how much energy we get out of that. It's just so hard to find anything that can compete with that, you know, whether it's solar or wind or whatever. I mean, that's just such dense, compact, rich energy, but it's life.
Yeah.
That's the life that we're burning. I try to make baby steps forward, and for example, I think you know I don't use plastic bags here. I make the customer, if they want a plastic bag, they got to pay for it. So I try to make baby steps forward, but I'm afraid baby steps aren't gonna do it in the long run, unless everybody made baby steps. We need everybody to make baby steps forward, and the world would maybe change fast enough.
Yeah.
But what we can't do is just say there's nothing it's a losing battle, so we can't fight it.
We can't do it. Yeah, you're an organic farmer.
Right.
Now, why?
That's a really difficult question. I guess first of all, it's the only thing I've ever known. Like I said, I grew up on a small farm and we raised all our food organically, so I've never farmed any other way. I also consider myself an environmentalist, so you know, there's no way you can use toxic chemicals and consider yourself an environmentalist. I mean,
So that's more than a baby step, I'd say.
I guess. Well, the thing is, this is what I tell people who come apprentice on the farm too, is when you go to start your own farm, start it the way you want it to be. Don't start it and say, okay, I'm going to start doing it this way, and then later I'm going to change to this better ideal way. Try to get as close to your ideal to start with. And then so I started organic, and I'm staying organic. Other farmers, they say, well, I'm going to start using chemicals, and then once I get these weeds under control, then I'll switch to organic. Of course, they never get the weeds under control, so they never switch. So my advice to new farmers is start with your ideal, and then you'll stick with that ideal.